You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Hi, my name's Richard Harrison, and you're listening to, or possibly watching, the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast.
Richard, let's talk about your umpiring journey. And seeing that this is a cricket podcast and you're a cricket umpire, let's talk about cricket umpiring and how you got started in your journey and how that all came about. Now, in the book, you said you weren't so keen on becoming a cricket umpire. I think you said in the book, what on earth you want to do that for? And cricket umpiring is a thankless task. But then you said, I've become a total convert when it comes to the cricket umpiring. But the story of how you got into it was an interesting one. It involved a storm and a tree being uprooted and a newspaper. Tell us more about that.
That's it. I was living in a town called Sevenoaks in Kent, and it was midwinter. It was getting dark about 4:30 in the afternoon, and every Thursday afternoon, I think it was, the pile of local newspapers would be left in the foyer of my building, and I would collect one each week and just read whatever was going on, and mostly for the TV listings. But there was an article one day on the back page of the newspaper about how a very famous lime tree that had been growing in the outfield of the St Lawrence County ground in Canterbury, the Kent County cricket ground, had blown over, been uprooted in a storm. And tacked onto the end of that article was a single paragraph saying that a local cricket association was presenting a number of training courses for aspiring cricket umpires over the course of the winter, and that anyone who was interested should ring this fellow with this number. And I just thought, well, that'd be interesting. I thought, look, it's winter. I don't want to go outside in the evenings. It's often snowing. It's freezing cold. I thought, well, why not? I'll just go along and do this course. So I rang this fellow. As it turned out, there was a course being presented over 10 weeks at the Sevenoaks Rugby Club, which was a 10-minute walk across the cricket ground, appropriately enough. And I just did it out of interest. I had no intention of pursuing cricket umpiring in any aspect as any sort of a career. I just did it out of interest, I thought, as a curiosity. But I went along there for 10 weeks, really enjoyed it, sat an initial entry-level exam, happily passed, and then that was that. And then the following year, I went and did the course again, sat a sort of second-level exam, and then I thought, well, look, I've come this far. I've done this course twice. I've sat 2 exams. I might as well give it a go. And one of the fellows who was presenting the course managed a panel of umpires that he appointed to various village and school games. And I got onto that panel, and he kept offering me games. And it wasn't until I typed them all up and stuck them on the fridge that I realised I was umpiring every Saturday and every Sunday throughout the entire season. But went from there, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And that was a year of those games, village and school games, and then got an invitation to join the Kent League umpires panel, which is sort of top grade sort of club cricket in the county, which meant sitting another exam. That was an oral exam, me and 2 examiners sitting in this church, which was a brutal endeavour. Anyway, happily passed, happily survived. And that got me onto the Kent League panel and went from there.
It's quite an interesting story, actually, that involved an uprooted tree, storm, and a newspaper, and look where it took you to becoming an umpire.
If that tree hadn't have fallen over when it did, I wouldn't have written this book. I wouldn't have umpired a single game of cricket. I wouldn't have played again. It was very fortuitous, certainly from my perspective.
Yeah, well, it's quite weird to have a tree growing on a cricket ground. But that's quite a unique feature of the Kent County.
It is, and they knew that tree was already 150 years old. The club knew that it was wasn't going to last forever. So they had been growing another at a local nursery that has since replaced it. So that whole tradition continues, and all of those specific local rules apply in terms of boundaries and the like when the ball hits the tree. So the tree's still there. It's just a smaller incarnation of it. But I think that's fantastic that they've actually replaced it with another tree, and they continue that extraordinary, unique tradition.
Yeah, it is. Cricket is a weird game and unique in some ways, and that's one of them.
Again, where else in the world will you find something like that?
Where else in the world would you play on a field with a tree growing, and it has a part to play in the game if the ball hits either 4 or 6?
It's entirely unique. Wonderful.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So then you mentioned in the book about your debut, your first game. Talk us through that. Everyone knows their first game, either as a player or an umpire. You explained it in the book, and it was a fairly, normal game of cricket until one particular incident happened.
It was
involving a green Jaguar.
Yeah, that's it. You reminded me now. Yeah. It was at a village called Mepham in Kent, and it was a pre-season village friendly practice match. They were playing another team called New Ifield, and we were probably only 3 or 4 overs into the match, and I was standing at striker's end, square leg, when one of the New Ifield batsmen played a very powerful pull shot, hitting the ball high in the air, way over my head and beyond the boundary. And I was watching the path of this ball sail over the boundary. And there's a road that runs alongside that ground. It's called the A227. And as this ball was sailing off into the distance, I could see a late model dark green Jaguar travelling along the road. And I think I said in the books, even my rudimentary grasp of physics indicated that the flight of the ball and the path of the vehicle were likely to coincide. Sure enough, they did. Landed smack bang in the middle of this car's roof. He's probably just literally taken it out of the showroom. Screech of brakes, driver jumps out, looks over the top, inspects the damage, figures out where it's come from. That wasn't hard. Marches straight onto the field, making a beeline for me. First game, 3 or 4 overs in, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute. I'm going 42 laws, all the sort of playing conditions, all the sort of scenarios we were presented in 2 training courses and 2 exams by that. So never had to deal with an irate motorist invading field of play. And I was in an absolute state. I thought, what am I supposed to do with this? Happily, one of the Mepham players managed to intercept just as he was about to get to me and explain the nuances of the insurance policy the club had, and they suggested the fellow go up and speak to the press. They got me out of jail. But it was just like, what on earth have I done? What am I supposed to do with this bloke? So happily it all sort of subsided, and I think he was okay in the end. But it was seeing this guy just marching towards me, steam pouring from his ears. I was thinking, mate, we didn't cover this in any of the 10 weeks.
No, I guess umpiring, you can prepare for so much, but you can't prepare for the unexpected.
Yeah, no, that was definitely one of them.
Yeah, you should know you're driving past a cricket ground. If a game's on, you know you're going to get hit. Your car's going to get hit by a ball, and that happens to so many people.
Well, it does. And any car that was parked alongside the ground, that was fair game. That wasn't covered. Yeah. That was like contributory negligence. If you're silly enough to park there and a ball goes through your window, which has happened once or twice when I was there, well, that's just your bad luck. So, there were a few grounds like that. I saw a few passenger side windows meet their end.
Yeah, you see videos on YouTube or whatever on social media, and you see batters hitting sixes, and then someone's windscreen or back window gets smashed, and there's a massive hole, and cricket balls in the front seat. And they come back and say, "What happened?"
All part
it wasn't here when I left.
It's a bit of a shock, but I think I said in the book.
Or people's houses, especially those village grounds, people's houses that are near the ground, their windows get smashed.
That happens. Yeah, it does. It does.
You come up from wherever you've been, back to your house, front window, massive hole. You probably thought, oh, someone's broken in. No, you see a red cricket ball there, and you're like, oh, not
sitting
again.
on the couch. Yeah,
this has happened for the 10th time this month or something like that.
I'm sure it happens a lot.
Yeah, it happens a lot. So that was quite a unique experience. Dealing with that motorist who wasn't just pleased about his damaged car that he just took out for a nice drive on the weekend. So from your umpiring debut to umpiring in Kent, the leagues, you talk about that in the book. You've talked about it a little bit here in this chat. But what was it like to umpire in England? What was it like umpiring in those leagues? What was it like to be a part of the village or league cricket scene in Kent, and especially in England? What was that like, umpiring those games that you did?
Oh, it was a joy. It was such a unique experience to be performing that role in that part of the world. In certainly the Kent League was in what was quite a decent standard competition. And I used to often just pinch myself. I thought, how on earth did I end up here? No intention, no desire ever to be here, but I absolutely loved it. And I guess I was also a bit of a novelty being an Australian in England, so that helped. But I absolutely loved it. Beautiful cricket grounds, games played in a very good spirit for the most part, competitive and pretty intense at times, but it was always played in a good spirit in England. At least that was my experience, and it was just such a unique experience, and I just felt very, very lucky that I'd essentially by chance just fallen into the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you suggest to any umpire who just go over there and experience that?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone who gets an opportunity to umpire or play cricket at any level in England should jump all over it. It's the very cradle of the game. That's where the whole sort of history, the whole traditions of it all stemmed from. And picturesque doesn't even come close. They are beautiful cricket grounds. The most modest village cricket ground in Kent, Sussex, where I umpired, they're magnificent, some of them. Absolutely magnificent. It's a wonderful experience. I'd recommend anyone does it if they get any sort of an opportunity. It was tremendous.
Absolutely. You were given the opportunity to umpire higher levels of cricket, especially a second county 11 match, that you enjoyed that experience immensely, as you mentioned in the book. The question I have is, did you have ever any higher ambitions to umpire first-class cricket, potentially, or you just were happy with what you were doing at the time? I'm happy going around different villages umpiring cricket. That's what I want to do. Did you ever have ambitions?
Not really.
Not really.
I was, had other sort of work on. I was already, by this stage, I was probably mid-40s. I mean, it wasn't really ever going to be a viable career option. But I remember one day I was sitting in the office and one of the girls in the office said, "There's a fellow who wants to speak to you on the phone." I said, "I'll put him through." And he told me his name and I just thought, who the hell's? And he says, "Oh, I'm so-and-so. I'm from Kent County Cricket Club." And I was like, "Oh, God, sat up straight." And ended up umpiring, as a consequence of that conversation, umpiring a couple of pre-season first 11 friendlies.
Yeah.
So that was the highest level, I guess, I'd got to sign my very first autograph that day, and only. This kid was hanging around outside the change rooms. He was asking all the players, and he came up to me and asked me to sign my autograph. So that was a bit of a hoot. But no, look, I was just happy. I got those couple of first 11 pre-season and a couple of second 11 games. Again, that was just being in the right place at the right time. But I didn't have any ambition to make a career out of it. Yeah, they were just things that just sort of fell in my lap. But it was a lot of fun.
There were 3-day matches, were they? Multi-day cricket.
Yeah, which again was a bit of a shock for
a bit
me,
different. Yeah.
I'd all the Kent League games were all one-day games.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, those two, the county second 11 matches, they were both 3-day games. And to be honest, I was grateful when it rained because I was exhausted. My feet hurt, my back hurt. I was grateful to sit down for a few hours. So I was about the only one who probably wasn't cursing the weather. Thank God for that, I can sit down for a bit. So that was that was a bit of a shock.
I think you mentioned in the book that you put your coat on because you were cold, and one of the players said, "Are we going back on the field?" Because usually when umpires do that, they, play's about to start.
I didn't realise that at the time, but it was cold, it was wet. We were sitting in the pavilion. I was cold. I put my jacket on, and the Sussex captain said, "Oh, are we going out?" And I said, "No, where'd you get that?" Because it was still raining. He said, "No." He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, you got your coat on." And I didn't realise, but that apparently, in England at least, is an indication that we're heading out onto the field. So I had to sit around in my shirt, freezing to death for fear of, giving some indication other than what we were intending to do. So that was a bit of a shock.
Yeah. What are your best memories from umpiring in England, in the leagues in Kent? What are some of the moments that stand out for you the most?
Oh, gee. There were just some wonderful individual performances. Some very memorable games. Some great players. We umpired a few games with former internationals, with future sort of certainly first-class players. One game I did was a charity match at Sevenoaks with a charitable organisation called Lashings, which organise former international cricketers to play against various club teams around England, and it's all designed to sort of raise money for charities. So an opportunity to umpire a Lashings game at Sevenoaks, which was terrific because there were players like Gordon Greenidge and Devon Malcolm, and Stuart Law was there from Australia, and any number of other former international players. So, I mean, not exactly in their prime, but that was a lot of fun to meet people like that. I remember telling Gordon Greenidge, I said, "Look, you know what? I used to pester you when I was about 14 years old for your autograph at the MCG." And he looked at me and said, "Yeah, pesto." He said, "Yeah, that'd be right." I thought, well.
Did you get an autograph from Gordon?
No, I did years gone by. I said, "I've got your autograph. I used to hassle you outside the dress." He said, "Yeah, that's right." Yeah, he raised his eyebrows. Yeah, lovely bloke. Lovely bloke.
Very fine opening batsman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was interesting because even other players on his team would come up and ask him, said, "Oh, who was the fastest? Who was the fastest bowler you faced?" And he said, "Look," he said, "anyone on their day." So there are any number of guys on their day.
Yeah.
So he said, "Look, Jeff Thompson, Andy Roberts," but he said, "Look, no one in particular." He said, "On any one day, any one of them could have been." So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But these guys gave up their time, and half the town turned out, and they had a big lunch, and it was a great event. Great event.
It would have been. You even mentioned the book. You came across a very young Steve Smith.
Oh,
You saw him firsthand, and you said, "This kid's going to play for Australia." And lo and behold, he's one of the world's best batsmen, and he did play for Australia.
Well,
you came across him. Tell us about seeing a young Steve Smith.
Well, one of my umpiring fixtures, endeavours, was I used to do a Friday night game, 2020 game in Sevenoaks, and it was just it was what they call a jazzers game. It was just a social game, but he had just moved down to Kent he'd been playing up in Lancashire, and he'd moved down to Kent. I think he was staying with an aunt or a family member. I think he hadn't really settled in too well on his own up north, and he was only about 17 or 18.
Yeah.
But he came on to bowl at my end, and to be fair, it was his leg spin bowling that caught my eye as much as anything else. I remember standing there, and every time he delivered the ball, I could literally hear it fizz out of his fingers, and he was turning it sideways. And then, of course, he came into bat, and there was clearly something about him too. He was clearly a bit special. It wasn't hard to spot. And I've sent an email to a friend of mine who lives in London, and I said, listen, see what I said, keep an eye out for this kid. He'll play for Australia. And sure enough, he did. But he played a season with the Sevenoaks first 11, and then I think played county second 11 cricket that same season or the year. And then, of course, the rest is history. Yeah, so that was quite a unique sort of fortuitous thing. But he wasn't hard to spot. You could see he had that kind of X factor about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And very fine player. And will probably go down as one of the greats of Australian Test cricket, that's for sure. One of the best.
Well, even then, he clearly had those same sort of idiosyncrasies.
Yes, as he does now, yeah.
Because I remember some of his teammates saying, he said, God, he's a bit wacky, when he's, waiting to go into bat, he'll sit there in his helmet and he'll be tapping his bat on his head and he'll be getting up and walking around. They said they just sort of left him alone. They all thought he was a bit strange. Lovely bloke, but they thought he was a bit strange.
Yeah.
He'd had those sort of elements before he arrived on the international stage.
So then you had to come back to Australia for different circumstances. And we already touched on a little bit about that, the difficulties of coming back. So how difficult of a decision was that for you to make, going back to Australia to live and potentially umpire, but giving away what you loved so much for many years in England?
Oh,
it was a very heartbreaking decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Look, it was one I had. It wasn't. It was a decision that was sort of essentially forced on me, but it was no less heartbreaking. I absolutely loved living in England. I loved everything about cricket in England. That was really disappointing in that respect. But anyway, that's how it panned out. And then came back. But I was very keen to continue umpiring. So I emailed Cricket Victoria a few months ahead of actually coming back and explained what my circumstances, background, qualifications, etc. were, and happily managed to get an opportunity on the Premier Cricket panel in Victoria.
Yeah. And then you mentioned you weren't really enjoying your time umpiring cricket in Victoria. So then you made a request, as we mentioned earlier, which was facilitated for you to umpire Premier League cricket matches. So it was that a straightforward decision for you to make, just to say, I just want to,
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted
do something
to do
different.
I wanted to do something that I enjoyed first and foremost, something where I felt I could make more of a contribution. But those two, I think, women's matches that I'd umpired in that first season, that fit the bill. I think that was the closest I'd ever come that first season in Australia to what it was like umpiring in England.
Yeah.
So that was the motivation there. As simple as that. I enjoyed it more. And spent the next 10 years doing just that. First and second 11 women's matches in Premier Cricket, but also I always made myself available to umpire all of the junior underage pathway programs, which was terrific because, you'd see kids coming through the ranks and you could see those that were likely to kick on and make it. I remember coming across players like Sophie Molyneux and Georgia Wareham in the under-15s. Annabelle Sutherland by that stage was already opening the batting for a club called Paran when she was 15. And any number of others too. So that was really interesting to kind of talent spot and sort of put her on the list. She'll go places. Go places. So that was always an interesting element to it at all. But you get to know some girls' parents and things. And it was nice to be just involved in all of that. But it was I just enjoyed it more. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Georgia Wareham. She did quite well in the T20 World Cup recently, taking wickets and coming back from injury and doing well for Australia.
Yeah, it's terrible it's horrible when they get injured. I saw her do her knee. That was awful.
Yeah.
Saw Sophie Molyneux do her ankle. dreadful. Oh, look, it's. I get quite emotional when I see these girls playing for Australia, but I get equally upset when I see them get seriously injured. It's awful. They work so hard. They're very talented. They're terrific kids. It's a tough caper, but they're wonderful ambassadors for the game, for the country, and everyone should take an interest and should support the Australian women's cricket team because they're a wonderful outfit.
Absolutely. I think everyone shares the same sentiment.
Yeah, happily more so now, which is great. Wonderful to see crowds getting out and, records being broken there. And it's tremendous.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about women's cricket a little bit later on in this discussion because I know you touched on that in the book and spoke so passionately about all the different clubs in Premier Cricket in Victoria. So you've umpired with so many people over your journey. You've had a lot of mentors that have helped you over here in Australia and also in England as well. So who were some of your mentors in your umpiring career, Richard? And who were some of the favourite or funny characters that you came across your umpiring days?
I actually dedicated the book to a fellow called John Allen, who was one of the lecturers at the training course that I first did. And he was the fellow who managed that panel of umpires that I first started when I got onto the village circuit. And he was a delightful, very gentle, very kind man. And I remember him telling me one day, I'm not sure if it's in the book or not, but one day he said to me, now, umpires don't make mistakes, we make decisions, which I thought was a very, very sage sort of bit of advice.
Yeah.
But he was a lovely man, and he just engendered everything that I loved about cricket umpiring. He's out there because he enjoyed it, and he was very highly regarded, very well liked amongst the whole cricket community in Kent. Sadly not with us anymore, which is a great shame, but delightful man. And there were certainly some characters amongst the umpires. There are guys who've been out there at it for years. There are blokes in their 70s and possibly even 80s who are still at it. Yeah. They're remarkable. Again, I think you can do that in England. There's something about cricket in England, that's more viable than it is here. But oh boy, I shudder to think the number of games some of these fellows have racked up. But they do it because they absolutely love it and they make a wonderful contribution.
Absolutely,
as they do here.
Yes,
not just an English thing. Some great characters and some terrific, very dedicated people who umpire at all sorts of different levels in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And without them, we would not have a game of cricket.
Well, indeed, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So you've umpired a lot of cricket grounds in England, in the leagues, and here in Australia. But you've also had the choice of umpiring. Had the chance, I should say, umpiring at the MCG on one occasion. So the question I have, Richard, is if you had to choose one favourite ground or favourite grounds that you've umpired at, what would they be?
I think it would, other than Shibben's own cricket ground on the Fairlawn Estate, I think the St Lawrence County Cricket Ground in Kent would probably be my that would be right up there. But if anyone wants to Google them, have a look at the cricket ground at Penshurst Place in Kent. The ground is literally a few feet from the front door of this enormous 14th century mansion. There's a cricket ground we played at called Withyham. That featured in an episode of Doctor Who when there was a theme of village cricket in there. It's just extraordinary. It's beautiful cricket ground. Look, I could reel off 10 or 15 in England alone that were just extraordinary. It was great getting a couple of gigs at the MCG, but no one was there.
Yeah, but still the opportunity to umpire on that hallowed turf.
Oh yeah, no, it was terrific. It was terrific.
There's a funny story in the book. You mentioned, where are the scorers located?
Yeah,
stadium. And it's a flashing light.
Well, it took me a while to find it. I didn't think of it. I normally, it's always pretty obvious where the scores are. We wandered out in the enormous of this enormous coliseum. The only people you could see were renovating one of the corporate boxes over there. They weren't much good to it. And next thing you know, I had to signal to the scorers. I don't know where on earth they were. And I was looking up at one of the two scoreboards, and I was just sort of signaling over there and looking around. And it took me a few goes. And the next thing you know, well, a few overs later, there's this light flashing like mad from the sort of middle terrace of the member stand. And that was them. And I think I said in the book, I imagine, I dare say the sequence of flashes was probably Morse code for, we're over here, you idiot.
Until you said that, I was like, so that's how they do it at the MCG with the scorers.
But yeah, well, I know now. I didn't know then, and I didn't have the sense to figure it out before we walked
Maybe they do that at other grounds as well, in a way, I think.
But they weren't exactly conspicuous. And my colleague was no help. He said, I don't know.
I haven't umpired here at the G before.
Anyway, so that was a bit of fun, but we finally found them. So that was a relief, because I was starting to get a bit worried.
Yeah, but I guess it's pretty hard to nail down a favourite, isn't it? Because there's so many wonderful grounds, as we talked about before in England. It's just hard to choose them. It's like choosing who's your favourite child or something like that. It's so hard to do, isn't it?
Favourite cricket ground in Melbourne would be the Albert Ground on St Kilda Road, where Melbourne play. That's a beautiful cricket ground. That would be a clear winner in Victoria. I get reel off 15, maybe 20 in England that could all fit the bill. But that's the beauty of cricket grounds in England. They are cricket grounds, just as the Albert is. It's only a cricket ground. No one plays football on it during the winter. That makes a big difference. You can establish them as cricket grounds as they are, but that only happens in England.
Yeah, absolutely. The other question I have is, if you had the chance to umpire an over of cricket, so you're standing at the non-strikers end, and you had the choice of picking two batters and one bowler, some of the world's best batters and bowlers in the men's and women's game, to umpire one over, see them bat and see them bowl, who would you choose and why?
Well, I've been lucky enough to see any number of the Australian women's team playing club cricket here in Victoria. So that's the only reason I would leave, the likes of Meg Lanning out, because I've been lucky enough to see her play, any number of times. So, bowlers, Dennis Lilly, Shane Warne. Batsmen, the best innings I have ever seen was, was it 1978? Kim Hughes against the West Indies at the MCG. I watched a lot of that from 120 yards away up in the grandstands. If I could have got closer to see what I think was the bravest and most magnificent innings, he made 100. I can't remember, 100 and something, but it was. I think he was wearing a cap a lot of the time, and they were bouncing him, and that was the bravest, most extraordinary innings I've ever seen. Well, I'd like to have seen that close up.
Yeah, absolutely. Another batter you would choose?
Brian Lara, Gordon Greenidge, I was always a big fan of. Greg Chappell was a wonderful, elegant player.
He was.
Going back away.
That's right.
But no, Chappell's cover drive was the thing of beauty. He had a wonderful elegance about him. And I admired the bravery of opening batsmen, like the Gordon Greenidges of this world, Greenidge and Haynes. Anyone who can open the batting with bowlers coming in, tearing it at nigh on 150 clicks, boy.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Not for me either. I'm happy batting down at number 11, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Not top of the order or middle order.
Yeah, no.
That's the job of the top order or middle order.
You got to admire those people. That takes courage.
It does. Any favourite memorable matches from your career as an umpire? that stand out? I know you've mentioned one in the book.
Oh, there's a
Which
few in
was
there, but I mean, I know the one you're going to mention, I think.
Yeah.
There was, I did a game at Paran in Melbourne, Paran Box Hill. And this was a game that just about half the Australian team was playing in. Paran had Elise Villani, Nicole Bolton, Jess Cameron, as she was then, later Duffin, Victorian captain Emma Inglis, Elise Villani, and of course, Box Hill had Meg Lanning. Now, Paran batted first and I think made something like 290 odd in 50 overs, which at that level is a seriously good score. So after the tea break, we came out for the Box Hill innings. And of course, Meg Lanning strides out to open the batting with a girl called Rebecca Carter, who's since played with the ACT Meteors and the WNCL. And a girl called Nicola Hancock, who plays in the WBBL with the Brisbane Heat, was opening the bowling for Paran at my end. And it was about the second or third ball of the innings. She delivered this ball. Lanning played at it. And split second later, the ball was resting in the wicket keeper's gloves. The keeper's gone up. The bowler's gone up. All the fielders in the vicinity have all gone up. This huge appeal for caught behind. And I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I just shook my head and said, not out, knowing full well that this may well not end at all well. So then fast forward to the second last over of the match, and Box Hill managed to get the winning runs with Meg Lanning still at the crease, having made 178 not out. So I think I wrote in the book, so it's not like it mattered.
Yeah.
And I've never asked her if she hit it. I did, however, hear from one of her teammates that day who did ask her, did you hit it? And she said, I'm not sure, which I dare say is code for yes.
Yeah, probably.
But it was awful. The Paran players were very unhappy. I remember turning to the non-striker for Box Hill and I just looked at her and I said, I appear to have lost a few friends. And I was standing every time she said, she was whacking them all over the place. And I just thought, do me a favour and just get out, will you? Just hit a catch, for God's sake. This is just getting worse all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the thought that I may have made a mistake. I had to make a decision. I didn't have any reason to give her out. The bowler was gracious enough to say, look, the wind was at my back. It was blowing away from you. You know, I dare say you probably didn't hear anything, which was very decent of her and hopefully true. Well, it was true. There was a wind blowing. And if I ever had a choice of end, I'd always stand into the wind for that reason.
Yeah.
But I didn't this day. And but yes, I hate making mistakes. I hate even the thought of making a mistake. But I may have in that instance. I probably did. We'll never know. But I fear
it burns when you make a mistake. We've got to be talking about that when we're talking about tips for umpires and that.
I still lose sleep over it.
Yeah, dealing with making decisions and mistakes and that a bit later on.
It's tough. It
is tough. But we're human at the end of the day.
You can only do your best. And, you're not out there to be everybody's best friend, and you're out,
you're just there to do your job, and that's to administer the laws accordingly.
But I
make sure the game is played in harmonious fashion.
I knew what was going to happen. I could have predicted that right from that moment on. I thought, here, watch this. She gets
public enemy number
70 odd, bang,
Yeah.
But anyway,
So obviously, all good things come to an end, Richard, and you had to give up umpiring last year. It was a very hard decision to make. When you reflect on your umpiring career journey, what are you most proud of, and do you have any regrets?
Oh, I certainly don't have any regrets. I loved it, loved every minute of it. I just got to a point with my back, I just couldn't get through a day, couldn't get through a game, couldn't pick up a bail if the wicket was broken. And I just didn't have the mobility to get into position for runouts and things. And I mean, you're going to be umpiring at, first 11 level. You can't be You can't be coming up short in that regard. And I used to, towards the end there, I used to come home after a game and I'd go to the supermarket and just walk around using one of the trolleys as a kind of a walking frame to just try and loosen my back up. So, But at the end, it was just, it just wasn't viable. Hated having to do it. I'd love to be out there now.
Yeah.
I still follow it. I still sort of, keep an eye on things. But I certainly don't have any regrets. I absolutely loved it. But I read a wonderful quote that was attributed to Dr. Seuss when I'd retired. And he said, "Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened."
Yeah.
And look, I had 15, 16 years of just the most wonderful, unique experience. I wish it could go on. I wish I could do it all again.
Yeah.
But I've been very lucky to have the time that I did in both England and Australia and the opportunity to umpire women's cricket here in Victoria. It's just been fantastic. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. And these things happen, I suppose. You can't keep doing things forever. And
look, it's, what do you do?
But that's good to hear. Now Hi everyone. Hope you enjoyed part 2 of our cricket discussion with Richard Harrison. I hope you enjoyed listening to Richard talk about his umpiring journey. Stay tuned for part 3 of our cricket discussion with Richard Harrison.